A lonely billionaire secretly pays for a poor boy's meal, only to uncover a heartbreaking truth. The boy is his long-lost son who never knew his father abandoned him. The golden lights of the luxury restaurant glowed softly against polished marble floors, reflecting a world that looked perfect from the outside. Crystal glasses sparkled, gentle piano music floated through the air, and waiters moved gracefully between tables, serving dishes that cost more than most people earned in a day. At the center of it all, he sat alone, dressed in an expensive tailored suit. The rich man stared quietly at the untouched plate in front of him. Everything about him spoke of success. His watch, his posture, the respect in the staff's eyes. But there was something missing, something no one else could see. His fingers lightly tapped the table, not out of impatience, but out of habit, like he was trying to fill a silence that felt too heavy. He slowly lifted his gaze. Across the room, a family laughed together. A little girl fed her father a bite of dessert while her mother smiled warmly beside them. Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was real. It echoed in a way that the quiet luxury around him never could. He looked away for a moment, then looked back again. Why did something so simple feel so far away? A flicker of emotion crossed his face. So quick, most would have missed it, but inside it lingered. Was this the price of everything I chose? Years ago, he had chased success with everything he had. Long nights, endless deals, sacrifices he never questioned. People came and went, relationships faded, and slowly, the noise of ambition replaced the warmth of connection. And now here he was, at the top, alone. A waiter approached gently. "Sir, would you like me to warm your meal?" He paused, glancing down at the plate he hadn't even touched. For a second he seemed unsure, then simply nodded. "Yes, thank you." But even as the plate was taken away, nothing really changed. His eyes wandered again, this time slower, heavier, searching for something he couldn't quite name. The laughter of that family continued, soft but piercing. It wasn't just sound, it was a reminder of something he once had, or perhaps something he let go of. His hand tightened slightly on the edge of the table. For the first time that evening, his expression shifted. Not with pride, not with confidence, but with something deeper. Regret. The kind that doesn't shout, but quietly stays with you. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, as if trying to release a weight that had been building for years. But some weights don't leave that easily. They sit with you, in moments like this, in places where everything looks perfect, except your heart. And in that silence, surrounded by wealth, admiration, and everything he once dreamed of, he realized something painful. He had built a life that everyone admired, but no one truly shared. Outside the grand restaurant, the night felt different. The golden lights that made everything inside look warm and beautiful stopped at the glass walls. Beyond them, the air turned colder, quieter, almost forgotten. And there, standing just a few steps away, was a small boy. His clothes were worn and slightly torn, hanging loosely on his thin frame. Dust clung to his shoes, and his hair looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. In his hands he held a small empty food box, old, slightly crushed, but carefully kept, as if it still held hope. He stood on his toes, trying to see better through the tall glass window. Inside, plates full of delicious food passed from table to table. Steam rose gently from hot meals, desserts glistened under soft lights, and people smiled as they ate without a second thought. The boy's eyes followed every movement. Slowly, quietly, hungrily, he swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the empty box in his hands. When was the last time he had eaten a proper meal? No one stopped to ask. People walked past him, some busy, some distracted, some choosing not to notice at all. To them, he was just part of the street, invisible in a world that moved too fast. But he didn't move. He stayed there watching, hoping, maybe today someone will see me. A soft breeze brushed past him, but he didn't react. His attention was fixed on a small family inside, laughing together as they shared a meal. A little boy, almost his age, sat comfortably at the table, smiling as his mother wiped his face gently. For a moment, the boy outside tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand something. What did it feel like to belong somewhere like that? His eyes softened, but there was no jealousy, only a quiet longing. The kind that comes from missing something you never truly had. His stomach growled faintly, breaking the silence around him. He looked down at his empty box, opening it slightly, then closing it again. Still empty, still waiting. A car passed by, its headlights briefly lighting up his face. In that moment, his tired eyes revealed more than just hunger. They carried stories. Stories of nights without food, of days without comfort, of growing up too soon. And yet, he didn't cry. He just stood there, watching, waiting, hoping. Inside the restaurant, laughter continued. Outside, silence wrapped around him like a shadow. Two worlds, separated by a thin piece of glass. So close, yet so far apart. He took a small step closer to the window, placing his hand gently against the cold surface, as if trying to reach the warmth inside. But some distances cannot be crossed that easily. Not by a child alone. And still he didn't leave. Because sometimes hope is the only thing a person has left to hold on to. Inside the restaurant, the soft music continued to play, and conversations flowed gently from table to table. But the rich man was no longer looking at the elegant decor or the untouched meal in front of him. His attention had shifted. Through the glass window he had seen the boy, that small figure, standing quietly in the cold, holding an empty box, looking in, but never stepping inside. For a moment he simply watched. Something about the boy's stillness, his silent patience. It stirred something deep within him. Not pity alone, but something heavier, something personal. He raised his hand slightly, signaling the waiter. The waiter approached respectfully. "Yes, sir?" The man paused for a second, his eyes still fixed on the boy outside. Then, in a calm but firm voice, he said, "There's a child standing outside. Bring him in." The waiter hesitated, surprised. "Sir." "And serve him a full meal," the man added quietly. "Whatever he wants." A brief silence passed before the waiter nodded. "Of course, sir." The man leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I don't want him to know it's from me." The waiter gave a small respectful nod and walked away. The rich man's gaze softened slightly as he looked back toward the window. No child should look at food like that. Outside, the boy was still standing in the same place when the restaurant door suddenly opened. Warm light spilled out onto the street. The boy stepped back instinctively, unsure, his fingers tightening around the empty box. A waiter approached him gently. "Hey, would you like to come inside?" The boy looked confused, glancing behind him as if the invitation was meant for someone else. "Me?" he asked softly. The waiter smiled. "Yes, come, don't be afraid." The boy hesitated. Was this real, or just another moment that would disappear? Slowly he stepped forward. One step, then another. As he crossed the doorway, the warmth wrapped around him instantly. The cold air faded behind him, replaced by soft light and a comforting atmosphere he had never experienced before. His eyes widened. Everything felt different. The lights, the smell of fresh food, the quiet laughter. It was like stepping into another world. The waiter guided him to a table. "Sit here," he said kindly. The boy sat carefully, almost nervously, as if afraid he didn't belong. Within moments, plates of food were placed in front of him, hot, fresh, more than he had ever seen at once. He stared at it. For a second, he didn't move. Then slowly he reached out. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up a piece of bread. He took a small bite, and in that moment, everything changed. His eyes softened, a quiet relief washing over his face. He ate faster now, hunger taking over, but there was still something gentle in the way he handled the food, like he was grateful for every single bite. Was this what it felt like, to be cared for? Across the room, the rich man watched silently. No one noticed him, and that's exactly how he wanted it. There was no pride in his eyes, no need for recognition, only a quiet sense of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The boy smiled faintly between bites, his earlier sadness fading, even if just for a moment. And sometimes, that moment is everything. The restaurant remained calm, wrapped in soft music and quiet conversations. But for the rich man, everything had changed. His attention was no longer on the room. It was on the boy. From across the distance, he watched him carefully, not in a casual way, but with a growing sense of something he couldn't explain. The boy was still eating, slowly now, as if trying to make the moment last. Every small movement, every expression, it began to feel familiar. The way he held the spoon, the slight tilt of his head when he looked at something new, even the quiet way he smiled to himself between bites. The man leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing just a bit. Not in suspicion, but in focus. Why did this child feel so close, like someone he had known before? The thought came suddenly, and refused to leave. The boy paused for a moment, glancing around the restaurant with curiosity. His eyes moved from one table to another, observing people, their laughter, their warmth. Then, for a brief second, his gaze met the man's. Time seemed to slow. There was nothing special in that look, no recognition, no reaction. But still, something stirred. The man looked away quickly, almost as if caught in a moment he didn't understand. His hand moved to his glass, but he didn't drink. This doesn't make sense. Why can't I look away? He had seen thousands of faces in his life. Business partners, strangers, people who came and went without leaving a mark. But this boy, this one child, was different. Not because of his situation, but because of something deeper, something unspoken. The boy continued eating, now a little more relaxed. His shoulders were no longer tense, his movements softer. For the first time, he looked like a child, not someone carrying the weight of survival. And yet, even in that innocence, there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a strength that felt familiar. The man's mind drifted for a moment. Fragments of the past surfaced, memories he had long buried, a different time, a different life, a choice he never truly faced again. He blinked, pulling himself back to the present. No, couldn't be connected. And yet, the feeling remained. He shifted slightly in his seat, unable to ignore the pull any longer. This wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, something that demanded answers. His gaze returned to the boy once more, softer this time, almost searching, as if he was trying to see beyond what was in front of him, as if he was trying to find something, or someone hidden in plain sight. The distance between them suddenly felt smaller, not in space, but in meaning, and sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind refuses to accept. The boy had almost finished his meal when the man finally stood up. For a moment he hesitated. He wasn't a man who struggled to speak. In business, his words carried power, confidence, control. But now, as he took a step toward the small table, something felt different, uncertain. He walked slowly, his eyes fixed on the child who had unknowingly stirred something deep inside him. The boy looked up as he approached, a little startled, quickly wiping his mouth with his sleeve. His posture straightened, as if he was afraid he had done something wrong. The man softened his expression and gently pulled out the chair across from him. "May I sit here?" he asked calmly. The boy nodded quietly. For a second, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, filled with questions that hadn't been asked yet. "You were hungry," the man said gently. The boy gave a small nod. "Yes." The man studied his face again, searching, wondering, trying to understand why this moment felt so important. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated for a second, then replied softly, "Ayan." The name lingered in the air. Something about it touched a place in the man's memory, but he couldn't yet understand why. "Ayan," he repeated quietly. "That's a strong name." The boy looked down at the table, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of his plate. "Do you live nearby?" the man asked. Ayan shook his head slightly. "No, I just come here sometimes. Alone." Another small nod. The man felt a slight heaviness in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "What about your family?" he asked gently. "Your parents?" Ion was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. "My mother is at home," he said. "She works a lot." There was a softness in his voice when he mentioned her, mixed with something else, something fragile. "And your father?" the man asked, his voice almost cautious now. Ion didn't look up this time. He simply shook his head. "I don't have one." The words were simple, but they carried weight. The man's heart tightened slightly. "What do you mean?" he asked, more softly than before. Ion paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "My mother said, he left before I was born," he said quietly. "She said he didn't want us." The restaurant noise faded into the background. The man felt the words echo inside him. "Didn't want us." Ion continued, his voice calm but distant, like he had accepted this truth a long time ago. "I asked her once if he would ever come back," he added. "But she just smiled and said, 'Some people don't stay.'" The man's hand tightened slightly on the table. "What have I done?" A feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years began to rise. Slow, heavy, undeniable. Regret. Not the kind that fades with time, but the kind that waits for the right moment to return. And now it was here, sitting across from him, looking into his eyes, unaware of the truth that was quietly unfolding between them. The man tried to steady himself, his voice barely above a whisper. "And does that make you sad?" he asked. Ion thought for a moment. Then he looked up. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "But my mother says, we're strong." A small, gentle smile appeared on his face. And in that moment, the man felt something break inside him. Because strength like that should never come from pain. The air between them felt heavier now. The boy's words still echoed in the man's mind, refusing to fade. He tried to remain calm, but something inside him had already begun to shift. Slowly, deeply. He leaned forward slightly, his voice softer than before. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. Ion looked up, unaware of the storm his answer would bring. "Her name is Sarah," he said simply. The moment froze. The man's breath caught, just for a second. Sarah. The name didn't just sound familiar. It felt like a memory being pulled back to life. A memory he had buried long ago. His fingers tightened against the table as his mind drifted, uninvited, into the past. A different time. A younger version of himself. And her, Sarah, standing in the rain, her eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling as she tried to hold onto something that was already slipping away. "You can't just leave like this," she had said. But he had. He had chosen ambition over love, success over responsibility. And he never looked back. Until now. The man blinked, returning to the present. But his expression had changed. The calm confidence was gone, replaced by something uncertain, almost fragile. He studied the boy more closely now, as if trying to connect pieces that didn't want to stay separate anymore. "And what does your mother do?" he asked carefully. Ion shrugged lightly. "She works at a small tailoring shop," he said. "She sews clothes all day." The man's heart sank deeper. That was her. That was exactly how she used to dream. Simple, hardworking, strong. Nothing had changed, except everything. "Did she ever talk about your father?" the man asked, his voice almost hesitant now. Ion shook his head. "Not much," he said. "She just said he was a businessman, very busy." The words hit harder this time. Businessman. Busy. Excuses he had once used so easily, now coming back as quiet truths he couldn't escape. The room felt smaller. The distance between past and present was disappearing, piece by piece. Could it really be possible that the life he walked away from had led him right back here? The boy looked at him again, curious now. "Why are you asking so many questions?" he said gently. The man paused. For a moment he had no answer. Because how could he explain something he was only beginning to understand himself? "Please, don't let this be true, or maybe, don't let it be a coincidence." His thoughts tangled together, confusion mixing with a rising fear, and something else. Hope. But it was a painful kind of hope. The kind that comes with consequences. He leaned back slightly, his eyes still locked on Ayan, searching for certainty in a truth that was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. Every detail, every word, every memory, they were all leading to the same place. A place he had once left behind, believing it would never follow him again. But the past has its own way of returning. Quietly, unavoidably, and sometimes, at the exact moment you're not ready to face it. The night had ended, but the questions had not. Days passed, yet the boy's face refused to leave the man's mind. Every detail replayed again and again, the name, the story, the quiet strength in his eyes. Sarah, Ayan, couldn't just be coincidence. And yet, what if it wasn't? The thought had become too heavy to ignore. So he did something he never imagined he would do. Quietly, secretly, he arranged a DNA test. No one knew. Not the boy. Not even Sarah. It was done carefully, through a small sample taken during their brief meeting. Something so simple, yet carrying the weight of an entire past. And now, he stood in his office, the envelope in his hand. The room was silent. The same office where million-dollar decisions were made without hesitation, where risks were calculated and controlled. But this was different. His fingers tightened slightly around the paper. For the first time in years, he was afraid. Afraid of a single truth. Afraid of what it might confirm or destroy. He stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then slowly, he opened it. The sound of paper tearing felt louder than it should have. His eyes moved quickly across the page, scanning, searching, and then they stopped. Everything inside him froze. The words were clear, undeniable, perfect match. Ayan was his son. The paper slipped slightly in his hand. His breath grew heavier, uneven. No, this couldn't be real, but it was. Every doubt he had held onto, every small hope that this might just be a misunderstanding, gone. Replaced by a truth he could no longer escape. He's my son. All this time he was my son. The room suddenly felt suffocating. Memories rushed back. Sarah's tears, her voice, the moment he turned away without looking back. And now, the life he had walked away from was no longer a memory. It was real. It had a face, a voice, a name. Ayan. He sank slowly into his chair, his hand covering his mouth as emotion finally broke through the walls he had built for years. Guilt. Deep, overwhelming guilt. Not just for leaving Sarah, but for leaving a child who never even got the chance to know him. A child who grew up believing he wasn't wanted. His eyes closed tightly, as if trying to block the reality. But it only made it clearer. How do you face a truth like this? How do you stand in front of your own child, knowing you were the reason for his pain? The question echoed in his mind, louder than anything else. But no answer came, only silence and regret, because some mistakes don't just disappear with time. They grow, they wait, and one day, they come back, asking to be faced. The paper remained in his hand, but it felt heavier now. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. Everything had changed, and there was no turning back. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the small tailoring shop, casting warm light over neatly folded fabrics and the quiet rhythm of a sewing machine. Sarah sat at her table, focused on her work, unaware that her past was about to walk back into her life. The door opened gently. She looked up and froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Years had passed, but some faces are never forgotten. The man stood there, not as the confident figure he once was, but as someone carrying the weight of everything he had done. "Sarah," he said softly. Her eyes filled with emotion, shock, pain, memories she had, buried long ago. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady, but distant. Before he could answer, a small voice came from behind her. "Amy?" Ayan stepped forward, his eyes moving between them, confused. The man's gaze shifted to the boy, his son. His heart tightened. This was it. The moment he had feared and needed. He took a slow step forward. Ayan, he said gently, his voice almost trembling. There's something I need to tell you. The boy looked at him, unsure but listening. Sarah's expression changed slightly, as if she already understood what was coming, and feared it. The man took a deep breath. Every word felt heavy. I am your father. Silence. The world seemed to stop in that moment. Ayan's eyes widened slightly, trying to understand what he had just heard. Sarah closed her eyes for a second, as if bracing herself for the impact of a truth she had protected for years. The boy looked back at his mother, then at the man again. You? He asked quietly. There was no anger in his voice, just confusion, and something fragile. The man stepped closer, his eyes filled with regret. Yes, he said softly. And I know. I don't deserve to stand here and say that. His voice broke slightly. I made a mistake. A big one. I left before you were born. I didn't stay when I should have. He paused, struggling to hold his emotions together. But I am here now, he continued, not to erase the past, but to take responsibility for it. Ayan remained silent, his small hands slowly tightening. The man lowered himself slightly, bringing himself to the boy's level. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said honestly. But can you give me a chance to try? The question hung in the air. Can a broken past really be repaired? Ayan looked into his eyes, searching for something. Truth, sincerity, and slowly, something in his expression softened. Not fully, not completely, but enough. I don't understand everything, he said quietly, but you helped me that day. The man's eyes filled with emotion. That matters, Ayan added softly. Sarah watched silently, her own emotions shifting. Pain still there, but slowly making space for something else. Possibility. Ayan took a small step forward, not fully closing the distance, but no longer stepping away. And sometimes, that is where healing begins. The man's heart felt lighter, even through the guilt that remained, because for the first time he wasn't running. He was staying, and this time he wouldn't leave. Please, let me make this right. The future was uncertain. The past still hurt. But in that small space between them, a new beginning quietly took its place. Moral: true redemption begins when we face our past and choose to stay.